Good morning, everyone. Shva Tov, good Tvach. Apologize for a little bit delay in this recording. So we are doing Mishna Yevamos, Parakeh, Chapter 5, Mishnah Aleph, Mishnah 1. So we need an introduction. The halacha is that if a person does, let's say a man dies without children, he had two wives. His brother now, the surviving brother, has both these wives falling to him for Yibum, which means that at a Torah level, they both have a Zika, which means a Yibum bond to him. It's going to be up to him what he's going to do. Now, if he does Yibum on one of the wives or Chalitza one of the wives, that automatically frees the other wife. There is no more Yibum bond to the other wife. She's free to go. She doesn't need anything. That's at a Torah level. At a Torah level, that's all there is. There's Yibum, meaning to cohabit with her and make her become her, and she becomes the brother's wife in that way, or to give her chalitza. According to rabbinic law, there's two other things that can be done. Not that these things are going to exempt her from to say that there's no more Yibum bond, but it has an effect. So, for instance, if instead of giving chalitza to the sister-in-law, he gives her a get, gives her a bill of divorce, like if she was married to him, he gives her a get. According to Torah law, it's nothing. There's no such thing as a get on a woman who falls to you for Yibum. But the Chacham and sages said, no. If you give her a get, we treat it like as if you gave her a chalitza to some degree. And the same way, if you do a chalitza to one wife, you can't do Yibum on the other wife anymore. So too, if you give a get to one of the wives, so first of all, you can't do Yibum on her anymore, and you can't do Yibum on the other wife either. Now, according to Torah law, what you did was nothing. It was meaningless. So there is still a Yibum bond there, and to free her to marry anybody else, she needs chalitza. But the get, according to rabbinic law, affects that you cannot change your mind and do Yibum on this woman, nor can you do Yibum on the other wife. And now you give chalitza to one of them, like any other case of Yibum, and the other one goes free. Another thing, if let's say we've mentioned this before, the sages instituted what we called mimer. That means a kedushin. Anytime you marry a woman, there's kedushin that's first done. The man does kedushin. He betroths her, gives her a ring, for instance. So even though when it comes to Yibum, there is no such thing. Yibum is he cohabits with her. That makes her his wife. The sages said, don't do it that way. You should first do a kedushin, like any other marriage. First do a kedushin to her, betroth her, and then you do the Yibum. Now, again, according to Torah law, this kedushin is meaningless. However, once you do the kedushin to this woman, you can. So we treat it similar to Yibum, that if you Yibum to one wife, the other wife goes free, and actually you can never marry her. There's a prohibition to do that. So once you go ahead and give a get, do mimer on one, you do this rabbinic kedushin on one, the other one becomes forbidden to you. So too, when you do mimer on one of the wives, so all the brothers now are forbidden to do Yibum on any of the wives. Because and again, according to Torah law, the Zika, the Yibum connection is still here as it always was. But with Rabbanan, we say that if if one of the brothers gives a get, or he does a mimer, that's going to affect as if a Yibum or Chalitza was done. If he does a mimer, the rabbinic kedushin, it's as if he did a Yibum, which now affects, him, or it affects him regarding the other wife and how the other brothers now, what's their connection? What are they allowed to do or not allowed to do to any of the wives? And the same thing, if you give a get, the same way a chalitza would affect that you cannot marry the co-wife or any of the other brothers marry the co-wife. The get, the divorce is going to have the same effect. Now, another thing that a mimer is going to do, this rabbinic kedushin, is that if it comes out at the end that you don't do Yibum to her, and you do chalitza to remove the Yibum bond, you have to give her a get also. Because rabbinically, you did a kedushin. If you did a kedushin, then that's considered rabbinically a regular marriage. If you're going to break that marriage, you got to give a get. You got to give a bill of divorce. So when you do mimer, it has the effects on the other wife and the other brothers like you did Yibam. And if you go ahead and do Maimer, you're going to have, and at the end you don't finish up and don't do the Yibam, you're doing Chalitza, you still got to give her a get because of the fact that rabbinically she was married to you, fully married, or regularly married, let's call it. Okay, so now that we have that introduction, now the discussion of the Mishnah is the following. Rabbi Gamliel Oimer, Rabbi Gamliel says, Ein get achar get. There is no such thing as one get after another get in the case of Yibam. Lo maimer achar maimer, nor is there maimer after maimer. So that means like this. You have a man who dies without children. He had 2 wives. And he has a brother. And the brother, this surviving brother, goes over to one of the wives and gives her a get. Now, as we said before, it's rabbinic. According to Torah law, there's a Yibam connection. Yibam connection is only removed by Chalitza. But he went ahead and he gave her a get. So we say rabbinically, it affects her. It affects her to the point that it's similar to doing a Chalitza to her, in which once you do a Chalitza to your sister-in-law, you can't marry her again. So now he won't be able to do Yibam. And that also now says that he can't do Yibam, he's forbidden on the other wife. Okay? Now, in this case, what did he do? This same person, the same brother, or the brother who gave a get to one of the wives, gives a get to the other wife, too. Gives a get to the other wife. So Gamliel says, look, the second get, ain't get after get. There's no get after a get. This second get is meaningless. Completely meaningless. Which means that if it's meaningless, then that means that the woman that he gave a get to after the first woman, after the first wife, that he gave the get to the co-wife, doesn't mean anything. It has no effect. He can marry her relatives. It's not like a woman you divorce who her relatives are forbidden to you. This was a meaningless get. It meant nothing. And therefore, it has no effect whatsoever. Now, the point here is, though, and we're going to see there's an argument about this, the point here is that even after you give the get, as we said, you give a get to one of the wives, she's not scot-free. You still got to give her a chalitza, because the get doesn't work to remove the Yibam bond. To remove the Yibam bond, you have to give a chalitza. So the get accomplished that you can't marry her. You can't do Yibam. You can't change your mind and say, I want to marry her. You can't do that. But you still got to give her a chalitza. And the co-wife, through the chalitza you give to one, it frees her too. But the point is that you gave to one, which affected her also to say that you can't marry her, the Yibam bond is still there. Right? The Yibam bond, the original Yibam bond that formed between these 2 women and the brother, because of the brother who died, it's all still there. So maybe the argument can be made to say that since even after I give the get, and even though the get affects both wives, there's still Zika. That means that the Zika means the Yibam bond that the Torah gave is still there. Well, so then maybe if I do a get on her, the get affects whatever is left of the Zika bond. So even though the first get went ahead and to a certain degree, let's call it degraded the Zika bond because you can't marry her. So, but nonetheless, there is still a Zika bond there, and the get could be considered, lessening the bond in that way. There's still a Zika bond. The same way the get on the first woman did something, it affects, because the abundance say that a get affects the Zika bond. Whatever left of the Zika bond, it could do that. It could on the other wife, it could also affect. Rabbi Gamliel says no. Gamliel says whatever a get has done to this Zika, meaning it has said that you can't marry any of these wives, because that's what the power of the get does. It kind of lessens the connection to the point that you can't perform the Yibam, but it's not gone. Whatever a get can do has already been done on both wives. Giving a get to the second wife is meaningless. It doesn't do anything more. That's from Gamliel's opinion. That's ein get acher get. Next, he said, maimer acher maimer. There is no maimer after maimer. Again, you did maimer on one woman, on one of the wives, which again said that, okay, she's betrothed to you. The other wife, you can't marry. You can't do Yibam on her. Okay? What did you do? You went and did Maimer on her too. So Gamliel says, Ein Maimer acher Maimer. whatever the first mimer does here regarding the Yibum connection is done. It's that it does what it does by the first wife, and it does what it does by the second wife. And now doing a mimer on her is meaningless. There's no point of it. There's basically nothing for the mimer to affect anymore, because whatever effect is done has been done by the first mimer. Okay, next. There's also, you don't have cohabitation after cohabitation, meaning if you did Yibum on one of the wives, a full-fledged Yibum on one of the wives, then there's nothing left. In that case, according to Torah law, there's no Yibum connection left to the other wife. And therefore, if you cohabit with her, it's just an act of cohabitation. It has no connection to Yibum whatsoever. And therefore, in that situation, she doesn't need a get from you. You know, when you do Yibum on a woman, and then you're not going to stay married to her, you got to give her a get. The second one doesn't need a get. Not only that, you're not even going to be forbidden on her relatives. You were never married to her. The same thing. There's no chalitza after a chalitza. According to Torah law, you do a chalitza to one wife, the other wife is scot-free. The second chalitza has no effect whatsoever. It's meaningless. And since it's meaningless, it wouldn't affect any of her relatives, because you didn't do a chalitza on her. It was meaningless. We've learned previously, you do a chalitza on a woman, her relatives are forbidden to you. In this case, with chalitza in the second one, it was meaningless, and therefore it has no effect whatsoever. The Chachamim say, Yesh get achar get, v'yesh maimer achar maimer. The Chachamim say no. You gave a get to one, and you give a get to the other get counts as a get also. Since there is some kind of zika bond that's still left, then the get is considered affecting that remnant, or whatever we see as left of that zika, even after the first get was given, the second get can take effect on it also. And therefore, it's considered that you gave a get to the second wife, and therefore you won't be able to marry her relatives. V'yesh maimer achar maimer, and the same thing. If you did maimer to one of the wives, and you did maimer to the other wife, same idea. Even though the maimer already affected the Yibum connection of the second wife rabbinically, nonetheless, there is still some kind of a Yibum connection there. The sages said Maimer works where there's a Yibum connection, and it's going to work here also, because there's still Yibum connection left, and therefore the Maimer takes effect. If the Maimer takes effect in the second one, you're going to have to give her a get, because you can't marry her, and therefore you got to give her a get. And whatever, and there's also going to be chalitza here, or whatever actually happens by the first woman that he did maimer on. If he finishes with ibam, she goes free. If he does chalitza, she goes free. But she's going to have to wait for the first one to finish up, what he started with the first wife. But they agree. After cohabitation, after chalitza, there's nothing, because there already the Torah says if you do ibam on one wife, the other wife is free, completely free. There's no ibam bond whatsoever. And the same thing, if you do chalitza on one, the second wife is free. There's nothing left with the Yibum bond. And therefore, what you do afterwards is completely meaningless. It has no effect. Okay. Chofetz Chaim. Sorry, I don't have the regular Chofetz Chaim in front of me here, so it takes me a little bit to find where we are. Okay, here we are. Klal Vav, chapter 6, Sif Yud, paragraph 10. Alpha B Shemararnu, the Kabbalah Shemara, the Lahaklit Beli by Shadavar Emes Asam and Atera. Even though we've already previously learned that one who hears Lashon Hara is not allowed to accept it. Mikomakam Amru Chazal Dalechash Miyubai, our sages say, but you can still suspect it. Ubir Davar, what this means is, you have to consider, you can accept this at the level of a suspicion. Okay, and that is, it can be a suspicion to you for the purposes of protecting yourself and others. But the point is, as he continues and he says, is that we have to look at this person that you heard this Lashon Hara about, that you will have a suspicion about. you still have to consider that person, in essence, 100% kosher Jew. Because every person starts off with a cheskes kashrus, that means a automatic status, a default status of being kosher, of behaving properly. Now this person told you otherwise, it doesn't change that. You have to look at this person as a 100% kosher Jew. You've got to treat him with all the responsibilities that we have to one another. You have to treat him that way. You cannot in any way look at him or consider him that he has lost his kashrus, his being a kosher Jew. Nonetheless, you could accept what you've heard as a suspicion. And the Torah says, if there's a suspicion about a person, you can stay away. You want to do a partnership with a person, and someone tells you he's dishonest. So you cannot accept that. You cannot accept it as the truth. It can't even be a doubt in the sense of, well, maybe this guy's not kosher. This guy's not. It doesn't act appropriately as a Jew should. No, you can't look at him that way. But there's a suspicion. There's a suspicion. That's how you got to look at it. There's a suspicion. There's a possibility. There's a suspicion, and therefore I don't have to take chances with that. At the end of the day, I cannot accept it as the truth, and I really have to still perceive this person as if I didn't hear what was said about him. I can only accept it, can only in some ways accept it, only at the level of suspicion, and as suspicion, I'm allowed to protect myself. And not only protect myself, but I even protect others if that's what this would accomplish. Have a wonderful day. Shua Tova Ketuvach.